Among the sources of procrastination for the next video that I have found in the last few months, including but not limited to education, employment, being a productive member of society, and having friends. I have been distracted of late by the cultural phenomenon known as the 2-week Minecraft phase. You all know the basics, so I'll omit any footage of gearing up and instead skip to the actual content, where I,
being far more advanced than my peers in all aspects, intellectual, physical, and psychological,
thought I could demonstrate my potential in the construction of a cathedral at the server's spawn. I will summarise by quickly showing you my gear and the materials I had gathered rather than involving you in the tedium of their acquisition. This cathedral was to be large, formidable, and, most importantly,
diabolical.
working from a bunker beneath spawn, I began laying out a foundation for the main walls, which would be the starting point of this build. I began with granite and then moved on to dripstone, packed mud, mushroom blocks, and jungle logs. Although I did change my mind on dripstone and I swapped it for jungle planks. Next, I added oak logs and then birch logs to the walls, outlining the windows and finishing with birch planks to complete my gradient. The walls were done, but they were looking somewhat bare, so the next step was to detail the wall with trims. I'd like to add now that this was done entirely in vanilla survival, without the assistance of Lightmatica or any other building mods. This made the process a lot more long and tedious. However, I loved experimenting throughout this process, so there's a lot that you won't see, but I had immense fun, and even though it did take a lot longer, it did end up creating a lot more joy than building something in creative and copying on a different monitor. In addition to the trims, I added window frames. Then I made cool cross designs under where the roof will go. And cut out a circular window at the back. As well as a smaller one above the door, before filling in a floor to build on. For the interior, I laid out some red carpet between where the pews and the altar would go, and filled in the wooden floor. built the altar, and then I hid glowstone in the carpet to make it a light source for the room, because lighting in mega builds is tricky and you need to put it wherever you can. I added the pews next. Before making these epic torches on the wall and a cross. With the interior more or less complete for now, I turned my attention to improving the terrain around the cathedral, terraforming where a brutal angular slope had once been to make it look more natural. Next, I could finally start on the roof. I decided to build 2 towers similar to how Notre Dame is shaped. So I began, continuing the gradient from the birch up to endstone, sandstone, and then polished sandstone as I went. Turning my attention back to the main body of the cathedral, I added a decorative trim. Next, I framed the roof and made a ceiling. I love these supporting beams that I did. They give structure to the build as well as breaking up the birch and making the build look detailed without complex patterns that overwhelm the eye. Now with everything done, the last major step of this build was the roof. It was at about this point in time where I became very disorganized, and so I built a storage room in the village I was also building next to the cathedral. The village started very ugly, and it was built very much over time, which is why I haven't really shown it yet. So this was a great addition to it. I made a path and was ready to get back to the cathedral. I began by lighting up the ceiling while riding a happy gast before beginning the roof. For the roof, I opted to use a large tile design which I came up with for shingles rather than make the roof a solid lump. This created a cohesive colour, as I used deep slate variants for the tiles, and prevented the roof being monotonous as the different shades made variation. This did end up costing a gargantuan amount of deep slate, but the finished product was more than worth it. With each layer, I decreased the amount the tiles stuck up by to allow the roof to slope, while in some places I used longer tiles to match the steepness of the roof. However, I eventually finished the shingles and could move on to creating a trim for the roof. I then finished with the addition of a central tower, completing the roof. before revisiting the two towers at the back to make them pointier. And with that, I was done. Well, except for the stained glass windows, which I forgot to record. And as I placed the last glass panes of the cathedral, I had finished. Also, I swear this was on my school's Minecraft server. No one got on. The 2-week Minecraft phase was over by the time I finished it.